Well, as our focus is on inflation, this is now, as far as the jet fuel prices are concerned, the 10th hike that we are seeing this year. Remember, flight tickets are already extremely expensive, have been at these levels for a long time, and this seems to be the trend that is going to be continuing. But it's not just the flight tickets. Our monthly budgets are completely gone for a toss, because from daily essentials to fuel, everything has turned expensive. In fact, retail inflation has skyrocketed to an 8-year high. We're at 7.79% in April. This is a rise in fuel, edible oil prices, food inflation also jumping with the rise in production costs, and seeming to be no relief as far as the common man is concerned. Remember, EMIs also now have gone up, with the Reserve Bank of India, in an effort to bring down inflation, has increased the rates, the repo rates, which effectively means that EMIs are now also higher. So how is all of this going to impact us? Let's in fact first go across to our reporters who are joining us before we go across to our guests. We've got at this point in time Shweta as well as Thoya who are joining us. Shweta, let me come to you first. Across the board, it has been an extremely difficult time coming out from the pandemic. As far as the Aam Aadmi is concerned, the impact that has had, and now inflationary pressures rising continuously.
Well, absolutely, Avni. Talking about the retail inflation, what we have seen is 8-year high, which is on 7.79%, and this is really concerning to people, as we see that even summer is harsh. The crude price has already been hiked. We are seeing the surge in fuel prices, as well as the vegetable and fruit prices have already been high. As correctly you have mentioned about the daily essentials, altogether it is a really concerning situation for people out here, as we are seeing the retail inflation going higher, and this is 8-time high. Now, back to back, like in 4 months, this is consecutive time. In the month of April also, we witnessed a rise in inflation. In fact, the RBI repo rate is also seemingly high, as you have already mentioned about the EMI is also going higher. There's no respite for people, in fact. And when we speak about pandemic, a very important thing, a significant measure, what we saw that after pandemic, it is again the salary of people. In fact, the salary bracket is remaining the same, but inflation is going higher. You talk about daily essentials, you talk about fuel prices, you talk about dairy product. Every nook and cranny, we find out that the prices are going increasingly high. In fact, if I just show you a quick glimpse where I'm standing, there are numerous vehicles on road, and these are the people, those who have been suffering from inflation, from steady fuel prices, which has been increasing, the skyrocket prices in each and every.
Absolutely, Shweta. Thank you so much for getting us all of those details. That, of course, is the impact at this point in time. Let me also go across to Thoya, who's with us. Thoya, I believe you have people with you as well who have been facing the brunt of the rising inflation.
So yeah, well, a lot of people are facing this problem. Inflation prices have gone high, and many people, especially people who are staying in, people who are middle class families, are facing a lot of problems. Whereas they are facing, if I talk about the pandemic, a lot of people have also lost their jobs, and many people are facing a lot of problems without jobs, and the groceries prices have increased, the petrol diesel prices have increased, the gas prices have increased, and also many problems like this the people are facing. Right now we have our resident with us, so they will be talking to us now. So please tell us what do you want to tell about this?
Like at present, we are all okay. But regarding the petrol and diesel, we find that there is a hike, and there is a hike in gas booking thing and all. So we request there should be a reduction in those things. Like being in the middle class families, we will not be able to cope up the increasing prices. And we need to see our children's family running, etc. We have many more expenses to be carried on. So if there is a slight reduction in these things and all, we can manage with the money crisis.
After pandemic, what are the problems you faced?
As a business people, we have lost our business completely. It took around 2 to 3 years to cope up, but not exactly. Around 50% we have coped up with the business. So once the business is normal, we can cope up with the money crisis. Now we are in the upcoming scenario only, like how to improve the business to the old mode of how we were trading. So like people are all suffering because of these business issues only. When compared to other people, like monthly income will be there. When comparatively to the business people, there will be reduction, profit, loss, and many things will be faced on. So that's it.
So yeah, like this, many people are facing a lot of problems with this inflation amount, and also we have another resident from the same family that he says that he always he travels a lot, so that he says that petrol diesel prices have gone high, and he's facing a lot of problems. So please tell us, sir.
Yeah, hi. So we work in IT, and earlier we used to get cab facilities and the rest arenas. So right now all the transport and the shuttle, everything has been closed, and we work in IT sector where we have to travel like 30 to 35 kilometers from my place. So without any prior notice, getting the price hiked, it is hitting on our faces, and as well as our wallet as well. So I would say that prior intimation, at least a 15 days prior will definitely be good. And I want these kind of discussions should be happening in public places, or that has to be intimated to the public that this is what the decision has been made. It doesn't mean that you make the decision and then tell us from tomorrow this is what the price is. So that has been very ridiculous, because each and every human being out here in India, especially the middle class people, they have their own kitty, the budget that they have to maintain for themselves, right? So if all sudden the oil price was like somewhere around 80 rupees or 90 rupees, and all sudden right now it is like 200 and above, so which is really chaotic is what I would say. So if this is the scenario, how can people survive if the person is in the middle class? Like, he will be having a budget for each and every resources that he's making it. So right now, what the concern right now we are facing is the gas price has been hiked, oil price, all sort of groceries has been hiked, electricity bill has been raised, and even the water supply, everything has been hiked. So I'm wondering, like, what is the concern that this has been raised? So in pandemic, there was no business, I accept. So what is the concern for raising all these kind of price hike is the major question that we have so far right now.
So thank you so
Sure,
much, sir.
thanks.
So like this, there are many people are facing a lot of
Yes.
problems because of this inflation
Right.
prices which have gone high. So let me get back
Right.
to you with more updates on this.
Absolutely, Thoya. Thank you so much for getting us all of those voices very clearly. Every middle class family, every common man is being impacted, and the budgets are going completely for a toss. But let me also go across to Ela, who's with us as well from the national capital. Ela, you've also been speaking to people and the brunt of what is being faced as a result of the rising inflation. What have you found?
See, the rising inflation is causing pain, especially to those who are at the middle of the cycle. I mean, the middle class. They are suffering a lot because from the crude oil to the CNG prices, to the LPG prices, to the vegetable prices, everything is costlier day by day. And I have a student with me, and he says that he travels from auto. Now it is getting difficult for him to travel as the prices are going higher and higher day by day. क्या नाम है आपका?
दीपक. सो बेसिकली लाइक जैसे डेली हम जाते थे पहले, इन्फ्लेशन से पहले, अभी जो हाल ही में जो बढ़ा है, उससे पहले ऑटो प्राइसेस बहुत कम थे. अब कॉलेज जाने के लिए हमें ज़्यादा पे करना पड़ता है जस्ट बिकॉज ऑफ फ्यूल प्राइसेस. ऑटो, डीजल, पेट्रोल, सब जितनी चीज़ें बहुत महंगी हो चुकी हैं. और बेसिकली हाउस होल्ड की भी होती है, जैसे नॉट एज अ स्टूडेंट बट हम पीजी में रहते हैं, तो हमें हाउस होल्ड की चीज़ें भी लेनी होती हैं. तो ऑयल से लेके वेजिटेबल्स तक सब महंगी हो गई हैं. और ये बहुत ज़्यादा एक स्टूडेंट की बजट के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा होता है. जो इन्फ्लेशन अभी है वो एज अ पास्ट फ्यू ईयर से बहुत ज़्यादा है, तो बहुत प्रॉब्लम फेस करना पड़ता है. बजट हमारा लाइक होता है उससे इश्यूज होते हैं
आप
इन्फ्लेशन।
कैसे मैनेज करते हो फिर?
मैनेजिंग लाइक फिर हमें और कट करना पड़ता है, एक्स्ट्रा चीज़ें कट करनी पड़ती है, बेसिक नीड्स के लिए एक्स्ट्रा चीज़ें कट करनी पड़ती है। ट्रांसपोर्टेशन के बसेस यूज़ करना पड़ता है बेसिकली, ऑटो लाइक टाइम बहुत जाता है हमारा, तो टाइम बहुत जाता है बेसिकली। ये इन्फ्लेशन को से हम एज अ स्टूडेंट टाइम की बहुत दिक्कत होती है, क्योंकि चीज़ें कॉस्टली हो गई तो लाइक उतना प्रेफर करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है।
तो ऐसे में आपको क्या लगता है क्या स्टेप्स लिए जाने चाहिए?
ऐसे में मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं एक इंडिया की मतलब ऑयल रिजर्व होना चाहिए। बेसिकली मेरा ऑयल पे कंसर्न है, तो ऑयल रिजर्व होना चाहिए इंडिया के पास। और प्लस गवर्नमेंट को इस कुछ अच्छी पॉलिसीज बनानी चाहिए, मोर फोकस होना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये प्रॉब्लम कॉन्टिन्यूस है, कोई पहली बार इंडिया में नहीं आया। तो इन सब चीज़ों के बारे में उन्हें सोचना चाहिए और एक सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट करना चाहिए इन चीज़ों में, ताकि एक लंबे दूरी तक के हम देख सकें। बिकॉज ये क्राइसिस कुछ ऐसा लाइक ये सडन क्राइसिस होती है। ऑयल क्राइसिस की बात की जाए, वेजिटेबल इन्फ्लेशन की बात की जाए, तो ये सडन होती है। तो उनको रोकने के लिए कुछ पॉलिसीज होनी चाहिए गवर्नमेंट के पास, जिससे ये चीज़ें कम हो और लिमिट में हो। बेसिकली गवर्नमेंट कंट्रोल होनी चाहिए ये सब चीज़ें कहीं ना कहीं।
So yeah, everyone is getting impacted by the higher inflation rates, as middle class is the only class which suffers the most. And if we talk about from students to the people who are working, are facing a lot of problem due to the high prices of fuels, to vegetables, to CNG, to
Right.
LPG gases.
Right.
So it's making their life difficult.
Yes,
Yeah, back to you.
absolutely, Ila. Thank you so much for getting us all of those details and those voices as well. Let's straight go across to our experts, our guests who are joining us on the show. Dr. Sarthi Acharya, former principal economist, UN is with us, as well as Dr. Vishal Sareen, economics professor, with us as well. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining in. Dr. Acharya, let me start with you first. In terms of what we've seen with regard to inflation, we've been talking about it for a while, but do you believe that we are in for the long haul as far as this level of inflation is concerned? Do we have to sort of now deal with life with high inflation? Dr. Acharya, I believe you're not muted. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
See, we are in for inflation for at least 1 year. Because, see, the inflation which we are getting could be divided into several portions. One is the imported inflation. We have about 40% of our international, of the economy exposed to the international components. About 22%, 23%.
All right, I think we seem to have lost that line with Dr. Acharya. We'll just try and reconnect with him. But meanwhile, let me go across to Dr. Sareen as well. Dr. Sareen, if you could just take that, point forward in terms of what are we looking at here, for inflation at these levels for at least the foreseeable future?
Good afternoon. As far as you were talking about Avni, about the long haul, and I believe that the inflation is there to stay for the upcoming years also. The reasons are very obvious that actually this is an imported inflation. So we must understand this, that we have not, it is not the domestic built inflation is there. The reasons being there are, first of all, the China and the long lockdowns, which are causing a problem and which are causing the shortage of coal, power, and most importantly, the semiconductors are there. Secondly, the supply chain disruptions because of the Ukraine and Russia war that are creating a problem. And we must understand that Ukraine is one of the major supplier of fertilizers to India also. So if the fertilizer prices are rising, on the way the oil prices are rising, on the other way the edible oil prices are rising because of the supply chain disruptions. So that making the life more miserable in the coming time also. So the reasons because of this, I think that what the doctor was saying, I think it is not for a year. I think it will stay there for a longer period of time. And the indication for the same has already been given by the RBI, where they believe that in the month of August, when the monetary policy committee will sit again, and there is a possibility that there is a high degree of chances that the inflation, rate of interest, repo rate would further increase. So we are there to stay, and we have to plan as per the long haul. We must strategize inflation accordingly.
Right. Dr. Acharya, if my voice is reaching you at this point, if you just wanted to continue what you said, and also specifically on the fact of the RBI action, because they chose to sort of, to hold an off-cycle policy meet and hike rates, front load them really to try and shock the system perhaps. Do you think that is perhaps more effective at this kind of a juncture rather than doing it in a phased manner?
I think what the RBI is doing is something which is kind of off the mark. Primarily because the inflation which we are having, as Professor Sareen has also pointed out, is a cost push inflation. Part of it is coming because of the oil prices are not coming down, because Russia is no more supplying to Europe. That means the pressure is on the Middle East, which is not expanding its production. So the prices of $110, $120 per barrel is weighing upon us. The other is that because of the closed China policy right now, because of the zero virus policy which they're having, there are hundreds of ships lying outside China, and we are critically dependent on the back end of our production on China, which he has pointed out, chips, I'm saying even motors, switches, everything depends upon China. And if those products are not coming, obviously it's a cost push inflation because you have only so many commodities. The other factor is that the rupee is sliding. We are not exporting enough. In fact, the import this year from China has been much more than any time in the past, despite the fact that we're talking about Make in India. And Make in India really is only from the front end, not the back end, and which is causing problems that we're not producing enough, but we are importing a lot, which means import of inflation. Then we are talking about food inflation, which you just extensively showed. There is a cost push inflation, partly because of the fertilizers, of course, but this is going to be impacting only in the next season, not immediately. But we have strained soils. We've got a 5% reduction in wheat production, but we're still exporting. But that's all right. That's not going to create so much problem. But there's a lot of hoarding on that front.
Right.
Then there is problem of coal, which is creating problems for electricity and water, which is causing inflation. And then there are oil seeds which are going up primarily because we are so dependent on sunflower. Why we are producing surplus mustard in this country. Why don't we use mustard? So we need to have a policy of at least a year to plan for seeing that we are not exposed to volatile economies and critical products internationally. That's very important.
Yes.
And RBI policies of really cutting down, making money more expensive is going to create more difficulty rather than, help the situation.
Right. Yes, absolutely, Dr. Acharya. In fact, before I go back to Dr. Sareen, I just wanted to pick up on a point that you had mentioned about it being cost-push inflation rather than demand-led. And that, of course, we've been talking about demand for a long time since the pandemic. In fact, that has been one of the biggest issues as far as India is concerned, the Indian economy is concerned. Going forward, how much do you expect this inflation could hamper the demand that is even now slowly coming back, that is leading to the recovery of the economy as well, and sort of undo the damage or the good that we've done so far in terms of recovery?
Vishal, you're coming in?
Yes, sir. I thought the problem here in India is that we have a plenty of agricultural product, but from last few years, the consumption habit has been changing. So that is creating more trouble in India because people are shifting from more mineral-oriented agricultural product. So there are the supplies shortages there. Apart from that, what the doctor was suggesting that we should believe in the domestic productions and we should, focus on the consumption of the domestic goods. But more or less, as 40% or more than the 40% of the imported India imports is actually for the domestic consumptions only. And the cascading effect of this is difficult to, ignore for the next 1 year or so. So I think that somewhere down the line, even the domestic demand cannot fulfill the desired requirement as you are expecting.
Okay. All right. Dr. Acharya, if you would like to come in here as well and talk about, the kind of long-term impact or the recovery of the economy and the impact that this kind of inflationary pressure is going to have.
You're asking me?
Yes, Dr. Acharya.
Yeah. Okay. When we are talking about recovery, what are the policies we are having? Unfortunately, I need to speak the truth. We don't have a long-term policy on any aspect, industrial policy or recovery policy. The only policy which we have, unfortunately, is fighting from one election to another, 3 or 4 elections a year. And we are really trying to tailor our policies to suit X state, Y state, Z state. Do we have a long-term policy even for 2 years is a question for industrial production or for agricultural production? The answer really is no. We are trying to understand the whole economy from a market perspective, following the World Bank, IMF kind of an approach, which really for an economy like India needs much more tailoring and much more guidance than what we're currently doing.
Okay. Dr. Sain, like we were just talking about, we are possibly likely to see further rate hikes going forward as well. How long do you think that this kind of a rate hike is going to take to actually have a significant impact on bringing down these inflationary pressures? And what else, in your view, needs to be done right now?
Monetary policy in India are not that effective, especially when you are facing an imported inflations. So whatever the rate hikes are there, they more or less, affects the organized sector per se. Okay. On the other hand, if you look at the inflationary data more meticulously, you will find that the retail inflation in rural area is almost 8.5%. So majority of the India is still in the rural area. So under that circumstances, it has become very, pervasive phenomena, inflation back in India. Secondly, as Dr. Acharya has also mentioned that we don't have a foolproof policies. We should have, if there are supply shortages, then we should move to create a policies, which we should move to create a strategies where demand side economies should come into play. But on the other hand, unfortunately, governments are not ready to, bring money out of their pockets, and they just want to drag it this further, and that will put pressure on the, retail segment, and ultimately the citizens will pay more. And saving, on the other hand, they will have a less option for savings also. As far as the rate hike is concerned, you can see that Federal Bank has also, raised the interest rate, and I think that in the coming months or so, they will further hike this. So inflation is now a global phenomenon. Even the US is facing the inflationary rate. So as long as it remain, the Ukraine and Russia war is knocking the door on the Europe, and the Europe will be at the, alert situations. So I think that this situation is going to deteriorate further, because it will affect the finances, it will affect the supply chains because of the Black Sea chain, and secondly, America is at the receiving end also, because of the China's lockdown. A lot of supplies that takes place, the America used to do, because America is the biggest trading partner of China, which are affecting the American economy very hard, and that factors will percolate down into Asian economies too. I am afraid that if the situations prevail further, then it may lead to some kind of another recessionary trends in India. And moreover, the COVID lockdowns, which the China is banking on, and slowly and steadily the more cases are cropping up again, then I think the situation will further deteriorate.
Okay.
So we must have these kind of policies, especially the demand side policies. Government should think on the fiscal aspect, which so far has not been, in the media segment, and nobody's talking about them. So government must give some kind of relaxations in the form of tax relaxations, or maybe on the oil segment. That is a crude oil, so diesel or petrol. State government should take the initiative to reduce their taxes, but unfortunately they are not going to do so, because this has been talked from last few years, but the states governments are dragging their feet away from taking such kind of decisions.
Okay.
So I think the situations will linger on further, because the global sentiments are also not supporting appropriately.
Right, right. Fair enough. Dr. Acharya, on the point of the fears of recessionary-like pressures coming in at this point in time or going forward, how concerned would you possibly be? Because we're also talking about, like Dr. Sareen was pointing out, savings coming down possibly. The consumer confidence itself may take a hit going forward if this continues.
See, there is something called stagflation.
Yes.
That is stagnation and inflation. Now, what we are facing is stagnation because of supply constraints on which we have no control because we are so critically dependent on foreign products. The front end is Indian. For example, you have a Bajaj scooter, but all the electricals are Chinese. The same thing with Tata Motors, the same thing with everything. The inside is all made in foreign countries, China, Korea, Japan. So unless we have some kind of a policy to indigenize these things, the point is we will keep on having this stagnation on the one hand and inflation on the inflation because of the reasons I have already explained. Stagnation because people just don't have the purchasing capacity in the face of jobs not growing and the economy not growing. Let's put it this way, the economy tumbled 7-8% 2 years back, of course, but now we have never recovered more than, let's say we are just back to what we were in 2019-20. So, I mean, how is the purchasing power going to go up? Look at the average wage these days. Fresh engineers are getting 15 and 20,000 rupees a month from average colleges. I'm not talking about IITs and NITs, etc. 15 and 20,000. Are they going to buy a crore flat? Obviously not. So what are they going to get? They're going to be 3 people living in a room, just managing food. Now that's not going to take the economy off. We need to have more purchasing capacity with the people, which means jobs have to be created. That means quality jobs have to be created. We need to have a 3 to 5 years policy to strengthen the people's purchasing capacities and jobs so that something can happen. This inflation is not something which is not unanticipated. This didn't happen like a ignition key. This was in the happening. To take the economy out of it, you need to have at least a 2-3 year policy to see how we come back. There is no shortcut to it. So
yes.
Stagflation is something we are facing.
Yes, absolutely. Fair enough, Dr. Acharya and Dr. Sareen. Thank you so much for putting all of this into perspective and spelling it out as to what the possible short-term and long-term impacts of this inflation are likely to be. Thank you so much for joining us. On that note, we're going to slip into a very quick break, but we'll be back with lots more news on the other side. Stay tuned.